And a good morning, Birds fans. Appreciate you streaming in here to Birds 365 on a kind of Thursday. And what I mean by that is, does anybody really know what day of the week it is with the whole holiday thing? I don't know about you, but I'm confused. And I'm easily confused. But the Eagles can't be confused, Johnny Mac, even though we have to acknowledge they're all just like regular human beings like us. They got family, they got holidays, they got everything else to do. But they got to focus in and get ready for the Cardinals. And I know it's Jonathon Gannon week, and we'll probably get some comments on the stream about Jonathon Gannon, and I get it. The whole way that Jonathon Gannon's career ended here in Philadelphia. You got to let it go. If you want to pick it up again next week, feel free. Go ahead. Get ticked off, blame Jonathon Gannon and everything else. But this week, just worry about the Arizona Cardinals. You got a football team that's got 3 wins coming to town. You can't afford to stub your toe. One thing I don't want to hear this week is, oh, it's got to be a get-right week. Well, guess what? Last week was a get-right week, and they got right. They won. They didn't dominate the Giants the way some people thought they would and felt they needed to, but they won, and that was much more important than anything else. Same thing here this week against the Cardinals, John. Win the game. Win the game. Move on, get a little bit closer to the end of the season. We'll see what the Lions and the Cowboys do and the 49ers do. We'll have a better grasp on it. Just win the game this week. Is there any way they can't win the game this week?
Sure. It's an NFL game. I mean, as you mentioned, the New York Giants were in a position to potentially tie the game. I think people forget the 2-point conversion as well. So you got to make a couple plays to even get to overtime. But when Tyrod Taylor came in the game, they got some juice. And I always say all NFL teams have a bunch of good players, and the Giants are no exception. The Cardinals are no exception. You always hear me say it's not college where you literally have like a bunch of games. If you're a big-time school, you're going to win. I mean, they're glorified scrimmages. You're going to win certain games. It isn't like that in the NFL. And even the worst teams can jump up and bite you on a given week, and especially this year where there's no real dominant teams. Everybody's shown some significant faults, even Baltimore, San Francisco at the top. So, anybody can beat you, and especially when you have a Kyler Murray type. I go back to that first game with Josh Dobbs, and he just won a game by himself. And Josh Dobbs isn't very good but what he can do is make some plays off schedule, and just, do some weird, quirky things. Kyler's actually good, and he can do that. They could lose the game, but if they, probably bring their C game, they're probably going to win it. They'd have to play really poorly. They'd have to turn it over a bunch, and they've been prone to turning it over a bunch.
Show the capability of doing that, Johnny Mac.
Somebody slipping like the Giants. If you think about the Giants game, I mean, they dominated that game, but you had two big mistakes. The kickoff return where the friendly fire fumble, a Boston Scott when Olamide Zaccheaus ran into him, and Dallas Goedert slipping turns into a pick six, and bang, you got a game. So something like that would have to happen, but something like that can happen. And again, Kyler especially can go out and just win a game by himself. And so he's a little bit scary. Matt Patricia talked about him and their speed as a whole on offense with Hollywood Brown. And I mean, they got a bunch of good players. They just don't have a bunch of good players when it compared to high level NFL teams like the Eagles. So, but JG is obviously going to want to win this game. Very competitive, and Nick's very competitive, and he wants to win this game. But yeah, I'll tell you, talked to a bunch of players, defensive players yesterday. Let's get the JG nonsense out of the way. Nobody, to your point, turn the page. Nobody dislikes the guy in that building. Nobody dislikes it. Do they wish it worked out better? Sure. Do they wish they would have been able to get Vic Fangio? Sure. Timing didn't work out. That's it. Turn the page. And by the way, I'll just say this about Vic Fangio. If he was here, you'd hate his defense too. Bottom line. Bottom line. So get over it.
That's true too, because it's not about pressure on every single play with it. There's a reason why they call it the Fangio defense. If he was here, they'd be playing the Fangio defense. That's
yeah.
And the point you made about the quarterback, I think, is something that we have to keep our eye on. I wrote it down as one of my keys to the game. The Eagles in their first, they just keep adding up. Man, we got to the end of the season fast. 15 games have played, for my estimation, one quarterback who can make plays with his legs. And when I make plays with his legs, I'm not talking about extending plays and off-schedule plays, because even pocket quarterbacks can be forced to do that every once in a while, and if they can, they can. I'm talking about pull it down, turn it up the field, get a chunk of yardage, move the chains, everything. One, Josh Allen. That's it. Go back over their schedule. Go back and look at. There aren't that many quarterbacks in the league that can do it to the level that Josh Allen can. We think that Jalen Hurts used to be able to. He's still one of the better ones, but he isn't as good as he was last year. Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. That's it. There's like 5 of them in the whole league anymore. But the Eagles have only played one, Josh Allen. And for those of you who don't remember, Josh Allen rushed 9 times for 81 yards, including 2 rushing touchdowns. So the one guy that they played all year that you would go, man, you got to remember he can take off with the ball at any time, actually put up some pretty damn big numbers against the Eagles. So I don't know how they will or how well they will defend a quarterback like Josh Allen purely with his legs. I'm not talking about the passing game. The passing game's a passing game, and Eagles where they're at. Got some improved play from young corners last week. May get Avonte Maddox. We'll get to that in a second. Back this weekend. I'm legitimately scared that Kyler Murray could end up being a key guy in this game when he decides not to throw the football, Johnny.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, and as I said, Matt Patricia talking about him yesterday about how he gets to his top speed so quickly. So he destroys. He's one of those guys. You mentioned Lamar. He's one of those guys that destroys pursuit angles of defenders. And yeah, I mean, last year he almost beat them making plays out in Arizona. And that was the backup kicker game, the Cameron Dicker game. They had the better backup kicker.
For just one good memory, hopefully leading into this game. You're right. He kept them in the game. He cost them the game by sliding 1 yard short.
Well, that's true.
On the first down.
Yeah.
All he had to do was go 1 more yard, and the Eagles could have lost that game last year.
That's harder than people think. The NFL, man, that you would think with the technology, they would get a better. There's so many times coaches are told on the field it's a first down, and they're starting to go with a 1st and 10 play, and all of a sudden they go, oh no, it's not. And it ends up being 4th down, and they got to scramble. NFL's got to fix that. But yeah, anytime, you got to make sure you get
that was based on that play last year?
No, I'm just saying in general. Just
okay, yeah, because it was pretty obvious he was a yard short. No, that wasn't it. Oh my God, they got the first down. Oh no, they don't have the first down. No, he never got close to the first down. He could have, but he chose to go into a slide.
You know me, I get in the tangent. It's one of my pet peeves. That happens a lot to coaches, and it shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, he's got to do a better job. But it doesn't change the fact that, one mistake doesn't mean he can't. He could have had the first down. He made a mistake.
Yeah.
And he's that type of player. And, for a quarterback, do you slide? Do you dive? And obviously, if you slide, they're going to place the ball where it is when you start the slide. So, yeah. No doubt that was a poor mistake, but you saw his ability to do the things that you were talking about. And he's a really good player. And I think people could forget about that because they hit a rocky road at the end of the Cliff Kingsbury era. And now they're in a rebuilding stage. But man, they were 9-0, I think, or 8-0, something absurd.
Not last year before that.
The year 2021.
They were the last team to lose a game.
Yeah. I mean, And people forget. My point to that is people forget how good Kyler Murray is. For whatever reason, they turn quickly when and quarterbacks get all the blame. You see it here. It happens in every city, and they get all the credit when you win. So it's part of the gig, but people forget how talented he is, and he's very talented.
All right. I know, Johnny, it wasn't a full practice previous this week, yesterday. So we got an injury estimate. I would say more good than bad in the fact that Avonte Maddox was a full practice. Does that guarantee he's going to play this week? No, it does not. But the fact that it was a full practice, not limited, is good news. And that both of the two missing linebackers from last week's game at least were limited. Today is a much more important practice, full practice. 2 days before the game, you can read more into it. But at least off the limited and not knowing exactly what it means because it's an estimation, I was buoyed at least somewhat by yesterday's injury report. How about you?
Yeah, more so because we talked to Brandon Graham and he just blitzed right through Nick Sirianni's nonsense. He said, "We're getting Cunningham back, we're getting Morrow back." With Avonte, Slay's going to be back soon, but not, whether with Slay and Avonte, it's about and Avonte was a full practice last week, all the entire week, so he hasn't played since week 2. So there's a ramp up period, and it kind of depends on what they want that to be. But he's very close. I don't know if it's going to be this week, next week. I assume they want to get him out there before the playoffs. With Slay, he's certainly going to be out there for the playoffs. The question is, do they want him back for the final game or something of that nature? And that I can't answer. But Cunningham should be back this week. Morrow should be back this week. Landon Dickerson should be back this week. So, and Brandon just, no subterfuge. Nick can try it, but Brandon just said, those guys are essentially playing. So that's big. And, they don't have great linebackers, but it's not. They went into last week's game with Shaq Leonard, who got here December 3rd or 4th or whatever it was, and Ben Van Sumeren as the linebackers. I mean, and they were able to persevere. But let's be honest. And I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but I saw somebody in the chat say, oh, they got much better with Matt Patricia. I told you this was coming. I mean, come on, guys. It's baked in, the improvement. That's part of the unfairness. And I think Matt Patricia's a better coach. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, he's a better coach than Sean Desai. But it was baked in. They were going to improve with Sean Desai. They were going to improve with Jody Mack. They were going to improve because Drew Lock was on the schedule and Tommy DeVito. And now it's the 3-12 card. And then you get the Giants again. They were always going to improve.
Instead of let's note, instead of the Cowboys and the 49ers.
Yes.
Both Cowboys
huge, and
huge
Bills.
Offenses.
And Bills.
And Bills, right.
I mean, come on, guys. I warned. You got to put the context on this stuff. They struggled mightily against the 49ers and the Bills and the Cowboys at home. The Cowboys at home, where they're averaging 40 points in a game. And yeah, they struggled and they should have done better, but it was always going to be improvement, and everybody knew it, no matter who was there.
Agree wholeheartedly on that end. And that's why we have to, although it'll be very difficult for some of our streamers and my listeners on WIP to put Gannon behind them for the week. I know this is the week you've been waiting for this week. It doesn't matter. It's the Arizona Cardinals. It's not Jonathon Gannon coming to town. It's the Arizona Cardinals coming to town, and the Eagles have to beat the Arizona Cardinals.
I just want people to forget the timeline, the Fangio part of it. The timeline doesn't fit. And Tim McManus did a good job, and those guys did a good job of confirming, and they had some extra stuff. The exact same timeline that I had 10 months ago, they confirmed, but they locked down the actual day when the Eagles were made aware of the impermissible call, which was Friday before the Super Bowl. Now, Jody, you can say, I texted you on Saturday. Gannon's getting the Cardinals job.
Yeah, he did before the game was ever played. You texted me that the day before.
Yeah, and if I know it, Howie knows it. But anyway, he didn't get the call till after the championship game. Vic Fangio agreed to terms with the Dolphins on that day. Tom Pelissero is the one who reported it. It was January 29th. Gannon, I talked to Gannon after the championship game. I congratulated him. I said, sorry about the Houston job. He was disappointed about not getting the Houston job for the second straight year. He talked to John Clark. He thought he was coming back. The call happened after Vic Fangio agreed, by the way, to take the largest coordinator contract in NFL history with the Miami Dolphins. And Vic Fangio isn't Josh McDaniels. And that was the other new part of Tim's report. The Eagles tried to get him to change his mind, and he wouldn't do it because he's a stand-up guy. Now, part of it is also he's getting the largest contract in NFL history. Part of it's money as well, and part of it's taxes. But Florida is obviously much more desirous from a money standpoint, as our guest Ricky Ricardo knows. Part That's Florida, true. Part Northeast. So he was never going to Josh McDaniels, the Miami Dolphins.
And by the way, John, and I try not to speak for someone else other than myself. I do it from time to try and read into what people are really motivated by in a fan base, either via stream comments or phone calls that I get. I think people are actually more put off by the fact that they believe, talk about trying to read someone else's mind, that Jonathon Gannon wasn't wholly there for the Super Bowl. That bothers them more, that the timing of it, and they could have had Vic Fangio. They really believe that Jonathon Gannon was not mentally prepared to be the coach in the Super Bowl, which I give you one guy who, if he's got reason to be ticked off, if there's someone who's got reason to be ticked off, Nick Sirianni's on the record as saying, I fully have faith that Jonathon Gannon was 100% committed, 100% focused for the Super Bowl game. The guy who's had the most direct effect to him, his partner in crime, his head coach, believes it had zero effect. Zero. Not 0.001. Zero effect on the Super Bowl. Gannon knowing that.
I've been telling people, and you've heard me say it, Shane Steichen spent more time with the Colts in the lead up to the Super Bowl than Jonathon Gannon did with the Cardinals. But nobody knows that.
Nobody mentioned Shane Steichen because
and by the way, Shane was also 100% invested. I'm not saying most competitive guy. Think about it. Even if you want to go to that point, Jody, you don't want to leave Philadelphia with a Super Bowl ring. I mean, it's the most competitive. It's just the dumbest narrative to get to that point and say, oh, I'm done. I don't want to win this game. The biggest. He doesn't have a Super Bowl ring. Are you kidding me?
Didn't have one before, and you don't know if you're ever going to get a chance to even get back there and get a shot at another one.
Dumbest narrative. It really is.
All right. We are going to upgrade the dumbness of the show. No, I'm only kidding. Ricky Ricardo is going to join us. The voice of the Eagles en Espanol, host on WIP. Muchas gracias, Ricardo, for coming on with us. Ricky Ricardo's next here on Birds 365.